"You've been talking to lawyers about us." Gavin screamed across the conference room, red-faced and sweaty like a cartoon villain who just realized the anvil was over his head. He slammed a folder onto the table so hard the blinds rattled. "Clear out your desk. You're done. You think you're irreplaceable? You're a technician, not a partner. I own this place now." The blinds didn't stop rattling until after I stood up. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. I just took one long look at the folder he'd slapped down, unsigned, outdated, and missing the one page that mattered, and I left. Security was already waiting in the hallway, like he'd pre-rehearsed this humiliation. Badge off, access revoked, files scrubbed. A 2-decade legacy wiped with the enthusiasm of a man who'd never built a damn thing in his life. 12 years. I was employee number 4 at Venturon Systems. Before the foosball tables, before the Series B, before we even had a company logo that didn't look like it was designed in Microsoft Paint. I was just out of grad school when Dean hired me, said he needed someone who could build a data routing protocol that would put us on the map. I didn't just build it. I was it. Every patch, every update, every backward compatible piece of duct-taped brilliance that kept our clients from switching to Amazon. I made that. Quietly, without ego, without asking for credit. That protocol got us our first government clients. It's why we landed the DoD contract in 2017. It's why we survived the 2020 freeze when competitors folded. I wasn't on stage at any of the launch parties. No splashy LinkedIn posts, no TED Talks. Just late nights with terminal windows and black coffee, fighting memory leaks with the desperation of someone whose entire future depended on it. And it did, because Dean, he wasn't just a founder, he was a believer. In me, in what we were building. He used to say, "If this works, it's because of you, not because of my pitch deck." Of course, that kind of trust was never codified in writing. Why would it be? We were a team, a handshake, a long game. Then Gavin happened. And before I go on, if you're still listening and any of this is hitting that little spot in your gut that says, "Oh hell, I know this story too well, do us a favor. Hit like, hit subscribe. It helps more than you know." 97% of people hear stories like this and scroll on. But if you're still here, that means something. So, stick around. Now, Gavin. Gavin Caraway had the posture of a man who read a summary of Lean In once and thought it gave him a license to fire people in bulk. When Dean stepped down, we were told Gavin would be modernizing Venturon. First day, he added 3 layers of middle management and installed an espresso machine that broke within 24 hours. He brought in a COO who used to sell crypto wallets. He started pushing for a new app interface, one that looked good in pitch decks but barely worked on real devices. Suddenly, there were consultants, efficiency audits, budget reviews. I was asked to list my quarterly outcomes on a whiteboard for some 26-year-old with a man bun who introduced himself as the product optimization facilitator. I wrote, "System works. No downtime in 14 months. You're welcome." That didn't go over well. Gavin didn't understand the tech, didn't care to. He started calling my department legacy infrastructure in meetings like we were a goddamn fax machine. At one point, I overheard him say to his VP of sales, "She's just one line of failure. We need to streamline the IP portfolio and cut the dead weight." Dead weight. The woman who built the thing you're still selling like it's a miracle cure for packet loss. So I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I contacted legal. Quietly. No drama, just asked them to dig up the original IP paperwork from my first year. Not even because I was planning anything. Just gut check. Protection. A whisper in my ear that said, "You'd better know what they think they own before they try to sell it." That whisper saved my ass. Because it turns out, the paperwork was incomplete. We'd filed a provisional patent on the protocol way back in the day, but it expired before Dean got around to assigning full rights to Venturon. The transfer doc was drafted, but never signed. All this time, the company had been licensing the tech under a handshake and a mutual understanding, which means, on paper, I was still the sole owner. And the moment Gavin found out I was even asking about that document, that's when he lost his mind. That's when the screaming started. That's when my badge stopped working. But that's also when the clock started ticking. Because Gavin wasn't just kicking out some dusty relic from the early days. He was about to sell a company for $280 million, and he didn't even realize he didn't own the damn engine. And I wasn't about to stop him. Gavin strutted into Venturon like a man auditioning for a Hulu docuseries called Startup Psycho, the rebrand that killed everything. He didn't ask where the bodies were buried, he just paved over the graves with PowerPoint slides and buzzwords. First week, he renamed the engineering department to Velocity Engineering, slapped QR codes on every whiteboard, and fired 2 of our best sysadmins for attitude misalignment. They'd been here 9 and 11 years, respectively. One of them built our failover protocol by hand during the 2018 Cascade outage. Gone, just like that. His next move? Consultants. Plural. A horde of them. Gavin loved consultants like toddlers love iPads. Obsessively and without understanding how any of it works. They came in with their polos and iPads and clipboards, smiling as they dismantled the company brick by brick under the name of efficiency. And Gavin soaked it up like a sponge full of Mountain Dew. Let's cut the bloat. Flatten the hierarchy. Simplify the pipeline. It sounded like leadership until you realized he was basically removing the foundation because he didn't like the color of the tiles. Budgets got slashed. Quarterly reviews became a full contact sport. Departments were told to submit OKRs in slide deck form with animated transitions. Suddenly, I was expected to summarize 12 years of architecture decisions into 3 bullet points and a bar graph. For stakeholder alignment. One morning, I walked into the break room to grab a coffee, and I heard Gavin's voice through the glass wall of the adjacent conference room. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. The smirk did all the violence. She's a redundancy, he told the room. We've already got 2 DevOps leads. If she left tomorrow, nothing would break. Nobody replied. No one corrected him. Just the clack of laptop keys and the soft, suck-up laughter of people trying to stay employed. That moment didn't enrage me. It clarified everything. The game had changed. I wasn't building anymore. I was a liability to be erased. Not for cause, not for incompetence, just for convenience. So I did the thing I should have done years ago. I opened my secure archive folder, dusted off the old documents, and checked the name at the top of the original protocol registration. Mine. I opened the provisional patent filing. Mine again. Expired, yes, but never replaced. No assignment of rights, no license renewal on file. I sat there in my apartment that night, cross-legged on the carpet, with 12 years of engineering history spread around me like a war map. Version control logs, internal emails, API diagrams scribbled in my handwriting on yellowed graph paper. I remembered the conversation with Dean in year 2, when we first started getting inquiries from federal clients. Do we need to file this formally? I'd asked him. He shrugged. Eventually. For now, we just need it to work. He always meant to make it official. It just never became a priority. And now? Now the kid who thought Kubernetes was a Star Wars villain was trying to strip mine the company for an acquisition play. $280 million on the table. Gavin thought he could sell the car without noticing the title wasn't in his name. I reached out to legal. Not some flashy in-house guy with a LinkedIn full of AI risk and TEDx talks. No. I emailed Patricia Yeo, our original counsel. She'd gone solo 5 years ago and only worked with founders and early-stage builders. I sent her a 3-line email and a scan of the unsigned assignment doc. Her response was short. This isn't minor. If this tech was never legally assigned, the company doesn't own it. And if they don't own it, they can't sell it. I stared at those words for a long time. This wasn't about ego. It wasn't about revenge. It was about survival, about leverage, about the difference between being erased and being the one holding the pen. And Gavin? He had no idea that the signature he never got was about to become the fuse on a $280 million bomb. The door didn't even creak open. He kicked it. Literally kicked it like a teenager who just got grounded. Gavin stormed into my office with a face so red it looked photoshopped. His phone was still in his hand, lit up with a legal memo I knew too well. The one I'd sent Patricia. The one that clearly got forwarded to him by someone with more access than ethics. You've been talking to lawyers about us? He shrieked, like I'd just sold secrets to the Chinese government instead of, God forbid, asking a question about my own IP. He didn't wait for an answer. Didn't need one. This wasn't a conversation. It was a performance. Gavin thrived on theater, and today's role was CEO betrayed by trusted engineer, as if he'd been personally stabbed by someone who dared to read a contract. You're poisoning the well, he snapped, pacing across my office like a rabid podcast host. We are on the verge of a major liquidity event, and you decide now's the time to pull some stunt about ownership? Stunt. That's what he called it. I said nothing. Let him spiral. That's the thing about Gavin. If you let him monologue long enough, he'll hang himself with the microphone wire. You know what this looks like? He said, pointing that stupid gold pen he always carried like it was a weapon. This looks like sabotage. This looks like someone trying to tank the acquisition so they can cash in later. That's what this is. No, Gavin. What this is me finally realizing you never once read the tech charter that built this company. He pulled a crumpled piece of printer paper from his blazer pocket and slapped it down on my desk. A printed email chain. Legal. Ops. Patricia's name at the top, and right in the middle, my scanned PDF, the unsigned assignment agreement from 12 years ago, highlighted in yellow like it was a crime scene. I glanced at the paper, then back at him. You've made your point, I said, voice level. Now, if you're going to fire me, get to it. His lips twitched like he wanted to say something clever, but couldn't find the line. So instead, he pulled the oldest corporate trick in the book. You're to clear out your desk immediately, he said, loud enough for people in the hallway to hear. Your access has been revoked. Security will escort you out. He didn't say my name, just you, like I was a stain to be scrubbed off his new leadership rebrand. I stood, took off my badge, set it next to the paper, picked up my coffee mug, not the one with the logo, the one my sister gave me with world's okayest engineer in chipped blue letters, slid my personal flash drive into my pocket, left the rest. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. Heads turned, slackers froze. No one said anything. Because everyone knew, even if they didn't know why, that something real had just cracked down the middle. The security guy met me halfway to the elevator. Big guy. Apologetic eyes. I held out my wrists mockingly. You gonna cuff me too? He half smiled. Just need to walk you out. Then let's walk. I didn't look back. Didn't give Gavin the satisfaction. Just walked. Calm and upright, while behind me the office kept humming with its forced positivity and motivational posters that meant nothing anymore. But the second I swiped my badge at the elevator and saw the red light blink, denied, I knew exactly what kind of man Gavin was. Petty, scared, and dangerously unaware that the house he'd built his ego inside didn't have its deed in his name. I stood there in front of the elevator, hands in my pockets, while the security guy tried to radio down for manual override, and all I could think was, he thinks it's over. But it hadn't even started yet. The drive home was dead silent, not because I was stewing, but because I wasn't. There was no fury, no screaming into the steering wheel, no Taylor Swift revenge playlist on loop. Just the hum of tires against asphalt and one crystal clear thought circling like a hawk. He's about to find out what happens when you cut out the one person holding the floorboards together. My apartment was exactly how I'd left it that morning. Mismatched coffee mugs in the sink, an unopened Amazon box on the counter, the faint smell of sandalwood from an old candle I forgot to blow out. I stepped over my shoes, set the coffee mug down, and walked straight to the coat closet. Tucked behind a box of winter scarves and a broken tower fan was the binder. Blue, plastic, warped slightly at the corners from too many years of being shoved around. A label on the spine read, Licensing Protocol Dev, Initial, in faded Sharpie. I brought it to the kitchen table, opened it, and began flipping through the pages with the slow, deliberate hands of someone preparing for surgery. Page 3, Provisional Patent, filed under my name, expired 2012. Page 5, Licensing Memo between Dean and I, temporary permission granted for company use. No dates, no lawyer signatures, just initials and a handshake email printed and stapled in the corner. Page 9, Assignment of Rights document, drafted, reviewed, never signed. No witness line, no final page, no notarization, no legal transference of ownership. In 12 years, nobody followed up. Nobody filed an official continuation. Nobody closed the loop. Because Dean trusted me, and I trusted him. And neither of us thought that a man-child with hair gel and a Tesla lease would one day run the place like it was his birthright. I leaned back in the chair, stared at the binder, and let the moment settle into my bones. Not panic, not even thrill. Just confirmation. The kind of clarity that doesn't yell. It just whispers. leverage. I picked up my laptop and started drafting an email. Not to Gavin, not to Patricia, but to someone Gavin hadn't even considered yet, the due diligence firm overseeing the $280 million acquisition. PE firm out of Boston. I'd met their junior associate once at a conference in Phoenix back in 2019. He'd asked smart questions about network latency and wrote thank you emails with bullet points. I remembered his name. That's all I needed. Subject line, Protocol Licensing Inquiry, Venturon Core Tech. Body. Hello. I believe there may be an unexamined licensing gap in the core IP portfolio your team is currently reviewing. I'm the original engineer of the proprietary routing protocol that underpins Venturon's infrastructure. Attached is a scan of the unsigned assignment agreement and provisional filing under my name. Happy to discuss further if useful. Attach the scans. No commentary, no threats, no uppercase words. Just the kind of red flag that lawyers wake up in cold sweats over. I hit send. Then I made a cup of tea. Because here's what Gavin didn't know, and what every good CEO should know. Due diligence lawyers don't care about your vision board or your acquisition countdown clock. They care about liability. And nothing screams liability like a $280 million tech company trying to sell a product it doesn't own. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need drama. I had the document. I had the name. I had the truth. And now, so did they. The first ripples came quietly, like the sound of distant thunder. I wasn't in the room, I didn't need to be, but I knew the tempo of panic when it hit corporate airspace. A friend from accounting texted me late Tuesday. You left at the exact right time. Something's brewing. Gavin's been pacing like a raccoon on meth. I didn't reply. I just sipped my coffee and refreshed the LinkedIn page for the PE firm leading the acquisition. Nothing public yet, but I knew the stage was being set. The PE firm, Densler Capital, all Patagonia vests and scary efficient paralegals, was known for one thing: exhaustive diligence. They didn't buy unless they'd poked every corner of your foundation with a stick and found no termites. And when it came to Venturon, the stick had landed on the protocol. Word leaked that Densler's audit team had requested a clean chain of title for all proprietary systems, specifically the routing protocol that powered our SaaS backbone. A formality, sure. Unless someone had forgotten to, legally own it. First, they asked Gavin's CTO, a nervous guy named Aryun who once told me he still didn't fully get how the API gateway worked. His reply, according to someone who overheard the call, was a symphony of "as far as I understand" and "to the best of my recollection." Not great. Then Gavin jumped in. Classic Gavin. All charm, no documentation. He claimed the tech was fully internal and assigned long ago. Densler's rep asked for the signed agreement. Gavin promised to forward it by end of day. That was Monday. By Thursday, legal hadn't sent anything because they had nothing to send. And now, someone up the food chain was asking questions Gavin couldn't bullshit his way around. So what did he do? He called Dean. Dragged the founder, his own father, back into the boardroom like a war veteran summoned to explain a battle he never wanted to fight again. They said it was just for historical clarity, but everyone knew. The buyers wanted someone whose name meant something, someone who might still remember where the bodies were buried. And Dean? He remembered. The room was filled with half the executive team, Densler's audit crew, outside counsel, and a few associates pretending not to text under the table. I wasn't there, but I got a perfect play-by-play from one of the paralegals later over drinks. Said it was the quietest moment she'd ever seen in M&A. Densler's lead legal counsel, a sharp woman named Claire with glasses that looked like they came with a kill switch, slid a single printed form across the table. Can you explain who the sole proprietor of the routing protocol internally called DRPX is? Dean picked up the form, read the top line, then the next. My name. Still listed, still active, still unassigned, 12 years later. According to the paralegal, Dean didn't say a word for a full 10 seconds. Just blinked. Once. Then he looked up and said flatly, "She built it." No one spoke. Not Gavin. Not the VP of sales who'd been parroting buzzwords like product ownership for months. Not even the junior analyst who once called the routing protocol just a script. The silence was cold. Clean. Claire didn't smirk. She just circled my name with a red pen and said, "We'll need to pause the acquisition process until this is resolved." Translation: until you explain how you're selling a car that doesn't have a title. Dean pushed the paper back across the table. I was told he didn't even look at Gavin, just folded his hands and stared straight ahead like a man watching the ship he built start to sink under new management. I got a ping on my phone an hour later. New email. Subject: IP clarification request. Urgent. No greeting, just bullet points, follow-ups, a request to chat. I closed the message and slid my phone across the table. I wasn't rushing this. The truth was finally breaking the surface, and Gavin, for all his arrogance, was finding out what it felt like to be on the other end of a product he didn't understand. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need to be. The only name that mattered was already in ink. The morning it hit the news, I was in line at a diner, halfway through ordering a Denver omelet when my phone buzzed. 3 alerts, one from a finance blog, one from an ex-coworker, and one from a Google keyword notification I'd set up years ago and forgotten. All of them said the same thing. Venturon acquisition paused amid technical irregularities. The press release was a masterclass in vagueness, but you could smell the panic between the lines. Procedural review. Ongoing IP clarification. No further comment at this time. Translation: the buyers backed out. The deal was dead. Venturon's valuation tanked before lunch. By market close, internal chatter had leaked to a few more industry insiders. Someone tweeted that the delay was due to an unresolved tech asset chain. Within hours, forums were lighting up with speculation. Reddit threads, Slack screenshots. Investors started emailing the board. One of the consultants Gavin had paraded around like a show pony tweeted, "When due diligence bites back." He deleted it 10 minutes later. Too late. Screenshots already lived forever. Gavin, of course, tried to spin it. He released a video on LinkedIn, filmed in his glassy office, sleeves rolled up, trying to look authentic. Said something about technical housekeeping and ensuring our standards match our ambition. It had 63 likes and over 200 comments. Most of them subtle knives wrapped in corporate language. Appreciate the transparency. Hope this gets resolved quickly. My favorite? You've got this, King. Internally, though, the oxygen was thinning fast. Emergency board call. Scheduled Friday at 8 a.m. sharp. Remote access only. Invitees restricted. That's how you knew it was serious. Dean was on it, which meant Gavin didn't get to control the tone anymore. The man who once said, "Why bring Dad into this? He's retired," was now leaning hard on the one person who could possibly vouch for the mess he'd made. And me? I got a very polite email from external counsel. Different firm, big reputation. I'd worked with them years ago on a federal compliance audit. Subject: assignment request, DRPX routing protocol. They called it a minor administrative error. Said they'd appreciate a conversation. Asked if I'd consider signing a retroactive assignment to preserve deal continuity. Offered an NDA, compensation, a possible advisory role. Even hinted at a public acknowledgement of my contributions. Should that be of interest? I didn't respond. Because when you spend 12 years building something brick by brick, you don't hand it back to the guy who just tried to bulldoze your house. Besides, Gavin hadn't even reached out himself. He sent lawyers. Like this was a parking ticket, not a foundation crack. Instead of replying, I opened my old code base. Not to gloat, just to remember, just to see what I'd built without noise, without titles, without buzzwords. The comments in the source files were still there. Some were silly, some were dated, but every single one had my initials. It wasn't just leverage anymore, it was ownership. And the people around Gavin? They were starting to see it. Word from inside was that legal had started covering their asses. Emails were being forwarded to outside counsel. The CTO had stopped attending meetings. The DevOps team started making backup copies of internal documentation, just in case. Nobody said the word, but everyone felt it. Collapse. And Gavin? He was flailing. He blamed legal, then IT, then Dean. He even tried floating a rumor that I had sabotaged the licensing process out of spite. But nobody bought it. Because when the only document that matters has someone else's name on it, the spin doesn't stick. I wasn't in the building anymore. But my absence had become louder than his leadership ever was. And for the first time in weeks, I slept like the lights were finally off in a house that didn't belong to him. Dean's name popped up in my inbox on a Sunday. No assistant, no forwarding address. Just Dean Caraway and a subject line that read, "Let's talk." He didn't even use punctuation. That's how I knew he'd written it himself. I opened it expecting ego, or at the very least, polite fury, but what I got instead was something I never thought I'd hear from Dean, not after everything that's happened, not after he let his son turn my legacy into a marketing deck. He wrote, "I didn't know. I should have. That's on me. Would you be willing to talk? No lawyers, no games, just clarity." 3 sentences, and none of them blamed me. I waited 4 hours before replying. Not to punish him, just to make sure I wasn't responding from spite instead of clarity. Then I typed one line. "The license was conditional. You'll find the clause near the bottom of page 47. He didn't respond right away. But when he did, it wasn't an argument. Just, "Understood." Clause 12.6b, page 47, buried in a section nobody ever reads. Drafted by Patricia back when we still thought we'd be roommates in a co-working space forever. The clause states that the licensing agreement for DRPX is voided in the event that I'm terminated without cause and without a 30-day transition period. A safeguard, she called it, in case the company forgets who actually wrote the thing. Dean had signed it. Gavin had never read it. And now it was live. The board met again that Thursday. I wasn't on the call, but I got the rundown from someone in finance who hadn't spoken to me in 6 years and suddenly wanted to catch up. The energy in the room was nuclear. The moment the clause was read aloud, verbatim, 2 board members requested outside counsel on record. Denzler Capital, the buyer, had sent a letter of concern, not a formal withdrawal, not yet, but close. Gavin was present for the first half of the call, then muted, then gone, suspended, pending review. That was the official language. Internally, everyone knew what that meant. No announcement was made publicly, no Slack message, no memo, just a slow erasure. His name removed from the top of the org chart, his direct reports reassigned, his executive bio redirected to a 404-page. And me? I didn't tweet. Didn't post a single well on LinkedIn. Instead, I sat at my desk, lit a candle, and updated my local backup. I hadn't won in the chest-thumping way people expect these stories to end. There was no courtroom, no raised voice, no moment where I dropped the binder on a table and said, "Checkmate." But I didn't need all that. I had something quieter, something cleaner, leverage. Because when you walk away holding the one piece of paper everyone else forgot to read, when your name sits untouched, unmoved, irreplaceable on the architecture of something they thought they owned, you don't need revenge. You already have the ending written. They just hadn't gotten to your chapter yet. The company-wide email hit inboxes at 9:07 a.m. on a Monday, just as predictable and sterile as any other corporate damage control blast. The subject line read, "Leadership Update and Governance Review." But everyone in that building, from the CFO to the intern refilling the snack bar, knew what it was really about. Dean had finally spoken. The message was 2 paragraphs long, no names, no timeline, no hint of the battlefield that had unfolded behind closed doors. Just a vague admission. An internal governance error has unfortunately impacted our current acquisition negotiations. We are conducting a full internal review and remain committed to transparency and operational integrity. Translation? They lost the deal. Denzler Capital officially pulled out that same afternoon. No press conference, no extended statements. Just a 2-line update on their website. Following a standard review process, Denzler Capital will not be moving forward with the acquisition of Venturon Systems at this time. The valuation dropped by 40% within the week. Investor forums lit up like a Christmas tree. Some blamed technical debt, others founder missteps. A few tried to float the idea that Denzler had overestimated their interest from the start, but anyone who'd read the tea leaves knew the truth. Venturon tried to sell a crown jewel they didn't legally own, and the one person who could sign it over had been walked out of the building like a liability. I didn't dance on their grave. I didn't need to, because 3 days after that email, my phone rang. No caller ID, but I recognized the voice immediately. It was the new general counsel, someone Denzler had insisted the board bring in as part of the acquisition prep. I'd heard she used to do forensic IP for mergers, the kind of lawyer who reads boilerplate for breakfast and keeps a separate inbox just for NDAs. She got straight to the point. We'd like to formally offer full retroactive compensation for the IP, recognition of your role as co-inventor, and an advisory seat on the technical board moving forward. No fluff, no flattery, just a clean offer. Like someone who finally realized they weren't dealing with a disgruntled employee. They were dealing with an architect who chose not to burn the house down when she easily could have. I didn't rush to say yes. Instead, I asked 2 questions. Will the agreement acknowledge original authorship in all public records moving forward? Yes. And will it be filed with an effective date matching the original deployment year? Yes. Then I said, send the paperwork. We didn't discuss Gavin. We didn't need to. His shadow was already being scrubbed from the company's walls. His name wasn't spoken anymore, not out of respect, but out of cleanup protocol. He wasn't fired publicly. He just became absent. A ghost in the systems he never understood. Dean followed up a few days later with a personal note, not an email, a handwritten letter delivered to my building with no return address. I should have safeguarded you better, it read. But you safeguarded the company, and in the end, that's what mattered. I folded the letter and slid it into the same binder that started this mess, the one with the unsigned assignment form, now joined by a full legal agreement with my name listed first. It didn't feel like revenge, it felt like correction, a rebalancing of weight, and somewhere between the silence and the signatures, I realized I wasn't bitter. I was just done letting people call something theirs when my fingerprints were all over it. This wasn't about getting even. It was about finally being seen. The meeting took place on the 12th floor of a neutral third-party law office, sleek, gray, sterile. A space designed to kill emotion on contact. No branded pens, no photos of employees smiling on mountaintops. Just a long conference table, glass walls, and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights that felt more like a hospital than a negotiation room. Which, honestly, suited me just fine. They'd asked if I wanted to return to HQ for the signing. I declined before they finished the sentence. That building didn't feel like mine anymore. It hadn't in years. I didn't need the gesture. I just needed the ink. Legal was already seated when I arrived. 2 junior counsels, 1 notepad each, flanked by the new general counsel who offered a nod that actually felt like respect, not protocol. Dean was there too, in a charcoal blazer that hung a little looser than it used to. His eyes were tired, but he stood when I entered. Old school manners. The kind of thing he used to say mattered when everything else goes sideways. He didn't apologize. He didn't need to. Some things land heavier in silence. On the table in front of me was the unsigned assignment document, the original one. My initials were already on the bottom corner, from back when I'd first reviewed it. Gavin had called it a formality at the time, said there were bigger things to focus on. Now it was the only thing that mattered. I flipped through the pages slowly, not to stall, but to savor the reversal. Every clause had been reviewed, every term renegotiated. They'd even included a timeline of public acknowledgement. My name listed retroactively in press materials, patent filings, and investor decks. Not because I begged for it, because they had to. Because now the architecture couldn't pretend I hadn't been there. Equity, finalized. Not options, real shares, real percentages, the kind that vest with voting power, not performative stock tied to milestones set by marketing. Licensing fees, retroactive to deployment year 1, indexed to market growth, no room for interpretation. And then, in the final folder, a single clean page, my signature line, blank. I took the pen, uncapped it slowly, and signed. First name, last name. The way it should have been 12 years ago. Dean watched the whole thing without blinking. When I pushed the page across the table, he nodded once, but I saw his hand tremble as he reached for it. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was relief. Maybe both. Gavin, of course, wasn't there. He hadn't been seen in weeks. Some said he was advising startups in San Diego. Others said he'd retreated to some incubator in Austin, trying to rebrand himself as a resilient visionary. I didn't care. His absence was louder than any closing speech he could have given. The org chart no longer listed a CEO, just interim executive committee. No LinkedIn farewell, no press release, just gone. As I stood to leave, the general counsel offered me a copy of the signed agreement in a branded folder. I took the pages, left the folder. At the elevator, Dean stepped beside me and said quietly, we used to call it our tech. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. I just said, for 12 years, you called it your tech, but my name was on it the whole time. And then the elevator doors opened. No applause, no music, no dramatic closing line etched in gold, just the hum of justice done properly, and the quiet satisfaction of a name, finally, on the document that had always belonged to me.